Chapter 6 is about the second method we're going to be talking about, individualized rating scales. Individualized rating scales are also known as target complaint scales, a self-anchored scales, and an individualized problem rating scale. And a big advantage to using individualized rating scales is that they can be tailor-made for each client. So if you can't find a standardized scale to measure what you're looking for, you can always design an individualized rating scale, and it's particularly useful if the client designs it with you. This is an individualized rating scale. We'll talk about this later, but this is called an individualized rating scale with general anchors. And here you have intensity of anxiety today is the question that you ask. It's the stem of the question, and 1 through 5 are the anchors. Where you have, as the number increases, the convention is that the higher the problem is, the higher the intensity of the problem is, or whatever you're measuring is. Some advantages of independent rating scales: they can be completed by all the groups that we've talked about: clients, practitioners, relevant others, or independent evaluators. They're, again, tailored. They can be tailored to individual clients, and they're very easy to administer and score, and so they can be used frequently. The suggestion is that they be used daily, that a client or if a client or a relevant other is asked to fill one out, they're asked to fill one out daily, and that's just more data that you can use to determine the pattern of the problem. And they can also be used in conjunction with other measures. In chapter 7, we're going to be talking about logs, and they can be used in conjunctions with evaluation logs, so we'll talk about that then. Other advantages: they can be used with most clients unless they're too young or perhaps disabled. They can be used to measure the intensity of problems, can be used just as standardized scales can to measure thoughts and feelings. And according to your textbook, research has shown that independent rating scales show evidence of good reliability, validity, and sensitivity to change. We're going to go over the steps in constructing an independent rating scale. The first thing that you want to do is to prepare the client. This is where you want to identify, conceptualize, and operationalize the targets. You want to negotiate with the client what they want to measure, and work with them to identify not only the stem of the problem but also those individualized anchors. And when you do that, those are called individualized anchors. We have generalized anchors and individualized anchors, and we'll talk more about the difference between those. But if you really want to tailor this to your client, it's best to use individualized anchors that mean something to your client. And next, you want to select the dimension that you're going to be rating. whether it's seriousness, intensity, importance, or frequency of a target. If, for example, if you talk about a pain, you can talk about the frequency or the intensity or the importance. The importance meaning the how has that affected their ability to go on with their day? Have they been able to accomplish what they need to accomplish during the day, or has the pain interrupted that significantly? And a target can be rated, of course, on more than one dimension, as I just explained with pain. Another example is depression. If you look up in the DSM, depression has many dimensions, and you can measure all the dimensions of depression that apply to your client with each with a separate individualized rating scale. The next thing you need to do is select the number of response categories, and somewhere from 5 to 11 is about right, usually 7 to 9. The number selected can influence reliability and validity, and the number should be large enough to detect important differences, because if you had 1 to 3 and your client kept saying it's moderate, my anxiety is moderate anxiety, which was the anchor of 2, then you wouldn't be able to pick up important differences. But if you had them rate it from 1 to 100, then it would be hard for the client to distinguish among those 100 categories. What's the difference between 56 and 57, for example? So again, the guidelines given usually around 7 to 9. Also 5 is used a lot, and sometimes 10 is used. On a pain meter, you can see 10 is used a lot on a pain meter. When you create your response categories, those are your anchors. You want to view them from 1 to, let's say, 7 as a thermometer. And even though this is an ordinal variable, the response categories between each one are not going to be the same. That should be your goal. You want to view it as a thermometer, the first one being low, and the last one being as high as it possibly can get, and the first one being as low as it possibly can get, and all the ones in between in order, and as close conceptually as they can get to each other. In selecting rating scale anchors, the anchors define the numbers. As let's go back to show you before, the numbers here define the anchors. The number is 1, the anchor is little to no anxiety, and the anchor for 5 is intense anxiety. Get back where I was. There it is. And there's 2 different types of anchors I've alluded to. Individualized anchors, you can see examples of those on table 6.1, and generalized or general anchors on page 165 to 167. And the individualized anchors are developed with the client and may be more relevant and meaningful to the client, whereas general anchors, as you look at those, they are not as individualized toward the client, but they can allow comparability across the target. And no matter what anchors you choose, whether they're general anchors or individualized anchors, the higher numbers should represent more of the dimensions measured. Now, if you use generalized anchors, if you use the same rating scale, the exact same rating scale, the generalized anchors in your book don't use the exact same rating scale, but if you use the same rating scale, for example, a lot of times the same rating scale is used, I get adequate sleep at night, my appetite is good, and you would use 1 through 5, 1 being strongly disagree, 2 disagree, 3 neither disagree or agree, 4 agree, and 5 strongly agree. In this situation where you have the exact same rating scales, you can construct a summary score across different independent rating scales, because it's useful. If you're going to have a client fill out individualized rating scales daily, it's useful to have them fill out 5 or 6 rating scales. So one thing that you can do if you want to use generalized anchor scales, you can compute and the same rating scales, for example, the rating scale I just gave you from 1 to 5, from strongly disagree to strongly agree, is that you can compute either a total score, sum score, or an average score. And this overall score can be more reliable. It provides an overall picture, but it's important to know the potential range of values and what higher scores indicate. So, for example, if you're computing a sum or total score, let's say we have 5 individualized rating scales, and they all have the rating scale from 1 to 5, okay? From strongly disagree to strongly agree. If you compute the total score, your potential range of values is going to be 5 to 25. Now that's 5, if they selected the lowest for each one, that would be 5, so that would be your lowest sum, to the highest sum if they selected the highest anchor, which would be 5 for all 5, would be 25, so it would be 5 to 25. Now if you computed an average, then your potential range of values, of course, would be 1 to 5, because you would be simply computing an average, and that average would be the same as the original rating scale. And the advantage, I like using averages, because if you get an average of, say, like 4.1, then you can say, okay, on average my client is doing between somewhere mostly around agree and a little bit over agree, and not, sort of further away from strongly agree. And in addition to knowing the potential range of scores, it's important to know what higher scores indicate, because you can get, you can construct a summary score of 15, what you want to know, in addition to the potential range of scores, is what higher scores indicate. So you always want to give that information and not assume that they know it. So you always have to say higher scores indicate more of a problem, more depression, or whatever you're measuring. In terms of who should complete an individualized rating scales, they can really be completed by anybody, and it's a good tool for practitioners to use during a session, a quick tool to use during a daily, doing a weekly session, whereas clients and relevant others can complete it on a daily basis. Or if a practitioner, if you're in an inpatient setting, it's something that can be done, you know, on somebody's chart on a daily basis. When to complete the independent rating scale? Well, as a researcher, you know, I want as much data as I can get, but you want to make sure that, you know, it's frequently enough to detect important changes in the client so you can make good decisions, good clinical decisions, but not so frequently that it is burdensome to the client or anybody else that are filling these independent rating scales out. And then, as you would with any other measure, you want to complete at regular, pre-designated times and conditions. In terms of where to complete an independent rating scale, really anywhere. You just want to standardize that location. If one week you complete it at home, then you always want to complete it at home. You just want to standardize that location so that you know that if you observe change, that change doesn't have to do with where and when the independent rating scale is filled out. And as I mentioned with the behavior observations, after we talk about the other two methods of practice evaluation of measuring targets, we'll talk about reliability and validity. And then I have some homework for you, and you don't get away with not doing this because you're an online class. The time frame and the way we do it is just going to be a little different. What I want you to do, it's not due next week, I want you to start. Well, you can start any time. What I want you to do is gather a week's worth of data, and select some behavior of your own family member, friend, or client. Most people find it easiest to do it, you know, on their own behavior, since you're always around yourself. I've had people do it on, you know, number of calories, you know, things that they eat, or particular things that they eat or drink, candy, water, anything that you want to increase or decrease or curious about. I want it to have, you know, some people want to do it on the number of cigarettes they smoke, so they can see the pattern during the week. And then I want you, using a computer, I want you to design a behavioral recording plan and form, which is basically just the form. The form includes the recording plan, because that includes where, when, where, who, and how often, who fills it out, how often it's filled out, where it's filled out, and when it's filled out. And then you fill out the form for a week, and then you don't have to use a computer to graph the data. You can graph the data by hand. And when I'm talking about graphing the data. I'll show you example that we looked at earlier. But first off, I want to tell you when this is due. It's due October 11th. It's due. So between now and October 11th, I want you to carve out a week, do this, and then I'm going to set up a discussion question online. You don't have to submit well, I'd like you submit the form and the graph if you can. If you can scan it, great. If you can't, but at least submit the form, and I'll put a Dropbox for that, and just to make sure that everybody's doing it, and then a discussion question where everybody is required to discuss about their experience in doing it. You know, did reactivity take place? Did the process of doing it affect what you were observing? Just by recording it, did that affect what you were measuring? Did it make it go up or down? And things like that. And was it a problem using it? Basically, anything, something that you're asking your client to do, something like this, I want you to do so that you know what it's like. So again, between now and carve out a week that you can do this, 7 days, and then turn it in by October 11th, and I'll have a Dropbox for the form and then a discussion question. And then in terms of a graph, all I want you to do is, this is not a great example, but I want you to, on the vertical axis, like if you did the number of cigarettes, record the number of cigarettes, and this would certainly be day, the day that you would do it, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or whatever day you started with, and you would only have one line, and then you would certainly have a title of the graph. Okay? So that's it for the behavioral observation project. If you certainly have any questions, let me know. I'll probably send out an email with this information in it as well. And I think that's about it for chapters, where are we? Chapters 5 and 6.